What if Jon Snow left the Night's Watch and joined Robb Stark? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. Robb surveys the gathered lords seated before him in the Great Hall of Riverrun. All around him, Northmen and Riverlords debate their next move. Although he knows he must rely on these men, he doesn't know them and wonders whether or not they truly have his best interests at heart. Although his mom and the Blackfish continue to guide him, he feels he can't relate to them. His thoughts are interrupted by his guard announcing someone has arrived outside the walls and is looking for the king. Frowning, Robb hurries out to see who the stranger is. His confusion quickly turns to joy as he sees the man before him. Although taller and looking more mature, Robb immediately recognizes his half-brother.
Jon! By the gods, it is you! I thought we might never meet again. What are you doing here? Did you leave the wall?
I have.
Have you taken your vows, Jon?
I have. But I could not stay away.
Ned was my father too,
and you're my brother. If you mean to go to war, I want to fight alongside you.
Robb's expression falters as he considers everything he said, but then his expression softens, and he pulls Jon close into a hug.
To hell with your oath, Jon. You came here now, and I need you. We'll figure out how to make this right. You'll find no executioner here, Jon. You're my blood. My court will welcome you.
Before Jon can respond, a voice cuts through the air.
Robb, you cannot mean to take him in.
He's my brother, Mother. He's my father's son. He has as much right to be here as any of us.
He's a deserter of the Night's Watch. The law is clear. All deserters are to be executed no matter their blood. Or have you forgotten the same law your father upheld?
I do not ask for immunity. Lady Stark is right. I left the wall to come here. If you see fit to carry out the sentence, I will not fight you.
I am not my father. And I am king in the north now.
And what will your lords say when they see you sheltered a deserter? You cannot hope to conceal the truth from them.
I will do no such thing. But I can tell them I intend to make amends with the Night's Watch once I return.
I will not stop you, but just know this is a dangerous game you are playing.
Thankfully, things are not as bad as Catelyn expects. With their recent win over the Lannisters, the Lords are in high spirits. While Robb hides nothing, they are willing to accept his words, and some like Greatjon even take it as a good omen, saying how the king's success has reached even the wall. However, Jon is not given a command, and instead remains only as Robb's advisor. With his declaration of independence, Robb now searches for allies and tries to appeal the Greyjoys, including sending Theon back as an envoy, but Catelyn objects. She finds an ally in Jon, who never trusted Theon. He argues that while Theon proved his loyalty, there is no telling what sort of man Balon is. It would be better to keep him there until an alliance is secured and use him as a bargaining chip. Reluctantly, Robb agrees and sends Lord Jason Mallister instead. In the meantime, Robb and Jon decide to move farther west to begin carrying the Westerlands to try and draw Lord Tywin out. Robb and Jon lead their forces into the Westerlands, raiding villages and castles, sowing fear among Tywin's vassals. These strikes culminate in the Battle of Oxcross, where Robb ambushes a Lannister host under Sir Stafford Lannister. However, trouble brews in the north as the Ironborn launch their invasion. But without Theon Greyjoy to guide them, they only capture a few minor castles. Meanwhile, Theon remains with Robb Stark, and though honor dictates that he be executed as punishment, Robb hesitates. Instead, he offers Theon a choice: to renounce his family and condemn their actions. This was done with the urging of Jon Snow. Given this choice, Theon throws his lot in with the Starks. Their only true success is capturing Moat Cailin. However, reports soon emerged that an Ironborn fleet was approaching Seaguard after they captured Lord Mallister. Without its lord, they hope to take the vital port. Jon Snow defends Seaguard. Jon arrives just in time as the Ironborn are trying to storm the walls. With a force of hastily assembled forces, Jon organizes a surprise nighttime assault. The Ironborn are caught off guard, their ships set aflame. Seeing this, the remaining Seaguard defenders sally out and crush the Ironborn force, capturing or slaying their captains. The Battle of Seaguard is a resounding victory for the Starks, and many lords now regard Jon with new respect. As he returns to Riverrun, he is displeased to see Catelyn there and tries to avoid her as much as possible. But despite his best efforts, he can't help but overhear one exchange she has with Sir Cleos Frey, who returns with terms from the Lannisters. Insults, in truth, and he's ready to dismiss it until he hears that they came from Tyrion. Jon thinks of the dwarf and their time journeying to the Wall.
My lady.
If you come to speak of Cleo's terms, save your breath. We'll not lower ourselves to answering insults.
I agree the terms are no true offer of peace, no more than ours.
Speak plainly, Jon.
I'm simply wondering why we bother with this mama's farce, exchanging terms that we do not expect the other to accept.
It is a matter of lords. We must keep face.
You are right. That is something I do not understand. But I do know it need not be like this. I know Tyrion Lannister. A journey to the Wall with him. I know you mislike him, but perhaps if we were to send some ravens.
Very well. I will allow it. Write to him. We will see if the imp has truly risen above his house's cruelties. But I expect all of these terms to be presented to Robb.
Soon, a raven flies out from Riverrun, landing in King's Landing. Tyrion is surprised to hear that Jon Snow serves his brother, but can't help but admire the young bastard's willingness to talk. A flurry of ravens soon moves between the two houses, exchanging pleasantries, catching up, and discussing terms. These take up much of the time, debating the fate of the Riverlands, exchanging of hostages, and the North's independence. Eventually, an agreement is reached. One where Robb agrees to lay down his arms and will acknowledge Joffrey as the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, though both are careful to avoid calling him Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, as Tyrion places terms in which Robb is allowed to continue calling himself King in the North, though he must pay tariffs, which are a thinly disguised word for tribute. The one sticking point comes with Jaime, as Tyrion wants him as soon as possible, but Jon will only hand him over after the peace has been signed. However, there is little time to discuss these terms, as the Lannisters find themselves embroiled in the Battle of the Blackwater against Stannis. However, to everyone's surprise, the Lannisters manage to win this battle, and this defeat puts an end to Stannis' threat. Though he survives, he doesn't have the forces to threaten the Lannisters. This puts them in a strong position to negotiate, especially since the Tyrells have agreed to alliance with them, placing a massive army under the Lannisters' control. This leaves Robb with only one real bargaining chip, Jaime Lannister. This isn't the end of Robb's troubles either, as Riverrun receives word from the Wall reporting that a wildling army is now marching out to attack, and they are in desperate need of reinforcements. The lords are split on what to do next. Lord Karstark urges the gathered nobles not to forget their goal, defeating the Lannisters. He reminds them that the Wall has held for thousands of years, and even 100 men can hold back an army. Lord Umber, though, is less certain, as his lands are closest to the Wall, and urges them to ride back and help. Their supporters all begin to roar their support or assent to the plan, leading to an uproar in the Great Hall.
Enough! You call the Night's Watch thieves and murderers, but how many of you have served alongside them or been to the Wall? Aye, there are criminals, but they are good men who would give their lives to keep us safe. We cannot abandon them now. Not when they face a threat they cannot stand against alone. And what of the small folk they defend? Your small folk? If they fall, the North will burn. Our people will suffer. And it will be on us. We shall be little better than the Lannisters.
For a moment, it seems Jon's words have swayed the room. But then lame Lothar Frey steps forward.
Noble words from a deserter. A man who swore the same oaths. He now urges us to honor and then abandon them. Tell me, Jon Snow, why should we heed the counsel of a man who couldn't keep his vows? I know my mistakes, Lord Frey. I intend to make amends for them. Amends, you call it? Not perhaps to help your Lannister friends in court? My spies tell me you have secretly corresponded with Tyrion Lannister, the very hand of the king who leads our enemies. Surely you will consent to us to search your quarters. Is this true?
The hall falls silent. Jon's jaw tightens, but he says nothing. Lords demand answers, but then he speaks.
Aye.
I talked to Lord Tyrion. I hope that our friendship would allow us to secure better terms. I hope to show you after our meeting.
He confesses. Search the room. Find what terms he sold our kingdom for.
Lords jump to their feet and roar at Jon, while men are dispatched to his room. Little does anyone know that Jon wasn't the only one talking to the Lannisters. After the Blackwater, Lord Frey began to consider his options as he doubted whether House Stark could truly win the war and began extending overtures to House Lannister. Tywin is open to sparing them, but only if they can sow dissent within the Stark ranks. As the chaos ensues, Catelyn feels a hand reach out to her and sees Black Walder glancing over at her and taking her to the hall.
Lady Stark, you know what must be done. I know you have no love for the boy. Consider this situation an opportunity. Give us your support. As the king's mother, your words weigh it.
He's my husband's son.
And yet not truly one of your own. Think about it, my lady. You'd be doing your son, your king, a service by removing such a liability from his court.
Not long after, the men return to the hall bearing the letters the Freys spoke about. The terms are read aloud, and the room grows angrier and angrier as they hear it.
The letters are proof enough. He's been conspiring with the enemy. By all rights, he should be executed for treason and desertion. Aye, it's the law, and the boy knows it.
Enough!
The room stills as she holds up a hand. She steps to Jon's side, addressing the lords directly.
The letters you found were sanctioned by me. I instructed Jon to write to Tyrion Lannister on behalf of this council, to gauge the possibility of peace. They were to be shown to Robb upon his return. Jon acted on my orders, not in defiance of them. If there is such a crime for acting as an emissary for the Queen Mother, I shall bear the punishment.
I know of no such law. I entrusted my mother with handling the diplomatic affairs of my kingdom. If she saw this as necessary, I see no reason to punish either of them. Even so, he's still a deserter. The law is clear. You said you intend to make amends with the Night's Watch. Yet there might not be a Night's Watch by the time you ride north. The gods do no favors to those who flee justice. Let him walk free, and you will curse your banners.
Then let him have a trial. If you fear the gods' wrath, let us put it to the test.
What do you propose?
Before we can talk of going north, we must discuss Moat Cailin. So long as the Ironborn hold it, then our words are wind. Let us see if the gods truly favor our path. Let Jon Snow lead the attack, and if he succeeds, then let that be proof that we are not cursed. If not, then, one way or another, the king's justice has been served.
No. I will not let it be said that I cursed my brother. Should I succeed, I vow to return to the Night's Watch to face punishment.
This is enough for most lords. Many men are still loyal to Jon after seeing his success, giving him an army of nearly 2,500. To his surprise, among them is Theon Greyjoy.
I've faced worse odds before. Besides, I owe you, Snow. Let's call this repayment.
Jon nods, and his small army marches up the causeway. They find a small group of men waiting for him, bearing the sigil of a lizard lion. A bearded, wiry man stands at their head. As Jon approach, he and his men all drop to one knee.
Jon Snow. I'm Howland Reed, Lord of Greywater Watch. I've come to offer my aid. Lord Reed? I didn't expect... We are proud to serve House Stark as always. My people know its swamps better than anyone. Let us help you reclaim it. Your aid is most welcome. Can you lead me and 500 men north of Moat Cailin? Easily. I will lead you myself. Meanwhile, my best fighters will help keep the Ironborn busy, and I'll give them something to distract them. Let me approach the gates, acting as though I've escaped Stark's captivity. My kin won't be able to resist sending men after me. That should buy you the distraction you need. Are you certain? Absolutely. Let's see how much my dear family hates me.
The swamps around Moat Cailin were eerily silent. The silence is only broken by the sound of a horse. Theon Greyjoy stumbles towards the gates. his ragged appearance aiding authenticity to his feigned escape. Behind him, the distant shapes of Northmen remains hidden.
Open the damn gates, you fools. It's me, Theon Greyjoy. I've escaped the Starks. They're trying to storm the castle. Open the gates, I have their plans.
The guards confer amongst themselves before a small gate creaks open. A handful of Ironborn emerge, weapons drawn, as they approach Theon. Suddenly, a distant horn blares from the swamps as poisoned arrows and spears come flying out. Howland Reed's Crannogmen emerge like phantoms, their shields covered in swamp muck. Behind them, lines of Northmen emerge and swarm the small group who find themselves surrounded and cut down. Arrows and throwing axes begin to rain down on the attackers below. Theon draws a hidden dagger and slits the throat of the nearest soldier before using him as a shield. The Northmen rush to and fro to try and breach the gates of the three towers, leaving the defenders to try and hold them back. From the north, Jon leads his contingent, attacking the fortress's weakest defenses. With the battle below, no one realizes what's going on until they are right on top of them. Jon Snow's men breach through the gates of the tower. These begin to fall one by one. Word soon spreads south of Jon's success, reinvigorating the north, who all view this as a positive sign. Far from being cursed, some even begin to think Jon might be a good luck charm. Even more good news comes in as Catelyn reunites with Arya and the twins, but this is only the first phase of their campaign. The second part is to crush the Wildling army. Unfortunately, Lord Karstark is incorrect, as the wall is unable to hold back the Wildlings, and the Night's Watch is on the verge of collapse. By the time the Northmen army arrives, they march to the site of Castle Black burning. Its rangers fled or deserted as Wildlings stream through. Their advance is fairly slow, as they focus on pillaging the gift, but the nearby mountains, the lands of the northernmost houses, suffer heavily. The northern armies march through the snow-covered plains of the gift. They've defeated several smaller pockets of wildlings, forcing them to retreat and regroup. From these battles, they also hear some stranger news. King Stannis had attempted to aid the Night's Watch, but Castle Black had already fallen to the wildlings by the time he arrived. Though he managed to kill many, his army was overwhelmed. Robb Stark surveys the battlefield, his direwolf pacing restlessly by his side. He splits the army into three parts, one to hold the center, one to flank the wildlings, and another in reserve. He rides to the vanguard with Jon Snow. The wildlings strike first, their savage cries echoing across the frozen field. They charge in a disorganized wave, wielding crude weapons or captured swords from their recent success. On the flanks, disciplined Thenn warriors push forward, holding the wildlings and preventing a flank attack. The northern shield wall readies. Shields lock, spears thrust, and the initial wildling charge is absorbed with grim determination. Jon fights at the front, his sword flashing as he cuts through the chaos. Around him, men fall, but the line holds firm. Robb leads the northern cavalry, smashing into the wildlings' left flank, where the Thenns form their shield wall. Surprisingly, they hold against the first charge thanks to their bronze armor and weapons. However, without their cavalry, the wildlings cannot chase off the enemy army. This allows Robb to charge again and again until their line begins to fold and retreat. But in the center, Jon faces off against Tormund Giantsbane, Tormund's massive axe swinging in deadly arcs. Jon ducks and parries, his arms shaking from the strength of those attacks. Tormund laughs and swings at him again, each strike powerful enough to cleave him in two. But Jon is faster. He bats aside each strike and manages to get under Tormund's defenses, striking him across the chest. But this is a shallow cut, and Tormund tackles him to the ground. Here the wildling has the advantage and punches him across the face. Jon tries to strangle the chieftain, but Tormund reaches and bites Jon's fingers until they hear the scraping of steel around him.
Now this is a wildling, true and true, but it appears you lost the battle.
They glance around and see the wildlings either on their knees or retreating in all directions. Among the former is Mance Rhaegar, who is surrounded by Robb's battle guard.
Yield!
Tormund hesitates, blood dripping from his lips before he nods. Around them, the wildling forces begin to crumble. The northern cavalry encircles the remaining wildlings. Robb summons Mance, Tormund, and the other wildling leaders to parley. The defeated warriors gather in a tent, with the king beyond the wall brought forward with his hands bound.
You think we're here to conquer? We're running. The others are coming.
We fled south to escape them.
He's telling the truth. I've seen them. One white nearly killed Lord Commander Moment. If the wildlings are running, something is chasing them. Something terrifying.
Even if that's true, these people caused chaos in the north. They've raided us for generations. Are we just expected to forget that?
No. Let me keep an eye on them. We can't very well throw them back across the wall. So let them settle in the gift and watch the wall with what remains of the Black Brothers. And let me return to fulfill my oath. Let me be a deserter no more. That seems like a fitting punishment.
Robb looks at his brother, skepticism fading, replaced with pain at what he's just heard. He wants to shake his head and order John to remain with him, but he has to admit that the plan is sound, and it would pacify his lords.
Very well. These people can't roam unchecked. You'll stay south of the wall to be their guide. Harm no one. Take no more than you need, and my men won't harm you.
Fair enough. We want to live, Stark, but we kneel to no one.
I am no lord, just a bastard of Winterfell. I expect no fealty and demand no service beyond you giving up raiding.
Very well. Those terms are acceptable. The lords murmur among themselves as the wildlings are released under Jon's supervision. Though many remain uneasy, the battle is won, and now it is time to resettle them. This leaves only the Ironborn left, but compared to the other threats, they are hardly an afterthought. Robb does not even take the field himself. Instead, he simply dispatches his lords to retake their respective castles. Part of him wants to order new levies to be raised, but he also considers the offer Jon Snow gave. With how turbulent things have been, he begins wondering whether he should accept it. As Robb sits in Winterfell, surrounded by his brothers and sisters, he realizes that this is what his father fought so hard to preserve. It wasn't dreams of glory or the thrill of battle. But these thoughts are interrupted by a visitor, one from the Vale. As the guards let him in, Robb and Catelyn are both surprised to see Littlefinger appear, clasping his hands together and smiling.
The young king in the north. We meet at last. Allow me to offer my congratulations on your recent victories.
Peter, what are you doing here? The Vale has declared neutrality in this war.
The Vale may have, my dear Catelyn, but times have changed. As it happens, I've been named Lord Paramount of the Riverlands and the Regent of the Vale after Lady Lysa's tragic passing.
All given to you by the Lannisters. Why should I trust a word you say?
The Lannisters and I, let's say we've reached the limit of our mutual benefit. Now, this leaves me free to serve whom I see fit.
And what is it you want, Peter?
Catelyn, you know me too well. My claim to the Riverlands and the Vale is tenuous at best. The Knights of the Vale respect only force, and my position over the Riverlands is not yet secure. I need your strength, your grace, and your support. In return, I offer mine.
And you expect me to just swallow this?
A fair question. You're already smarter than your father. Allow me to offer a token of good faith. I've heard how you found your youngest girl. Please allow me to make your family whole again. Sansa Stark is safe under my protection. I helped her escape the Lannisters and brought her to the Vale. With your consent, I'll return her to your family immediately.
Robb's breath catches, and Catelyn's hand flies to her chest.
Sansa?
Yes, Catelyn. She's alive and well. You have my word.
And why would you do this? Why betray the Lannisters now?
Because there is a great opportunity for you. This war has 5 kings, yet now only one remains. Stannis, Renly, Baelon, Joffrey, and even Tywin are all gone.
Tywin is dead.
Murdered by Tyrion Lannister himself. Now with the Vale, nothing stands between you and victory.
And what is the cost of this alliance, Peter?
A small price. As I mentioned, I need to secure my grip over the Vale to provide its knights. Our houses have old ties. Perhaps making them official shall help.
My mother is not yours to bargain for.
It is not an insult, your grace, but a proposal born of necessity.
Consider the strength such a union would bring. The Riverlands united under me, the veil behind your banners. 3 of the greatest houses by your side, and the 7 kingdoms ripe for the plucking. What better way to secure the North?
To christen the rebuilding of Winterfell, a wedding is held in the Godswood, which northern lords and new wildlings are invited to attend. This is the product of long hours of negotiation between Robb, Catelyn, and Littlefinger. As promised, Littlefinger has sent Sansa home from the Vale, where she reunites with her family. While grateful for that, the Starks are far from convinced. Even Catelyn, who grew up with him, begins to have her doubts. However, the armies of the Vale are too important to ignore, and they reluctantly agree to this marriage proposal, albeit with different terms. As his overlord of the Riverlands remains with Edmure, any children will not supersede lordship over the North, Riverlands, or Eyrie. Their ruling houses shall still be the Starks, Tullys, and Arryns. Littlefinger gladly agrees to these terms, and Septim is called and organizes the ceremony. However, it is a quiet affair, as people seem less inclined to celebrate, chief among them Catelyn, who does so with great reluctance. Yet Peter remains oblivious to this as he smiles and regards his bride.
I'm going to scream when I make love to my wife. I'm going to scream so loud they'll hear me across the narrow sea.
Later that night, Robb Stark tries to ignore the screams as he considers his next move. To his surprise, things have been quiet from his southern border as Lord Tywin followed Joffrey to the grave. Robb already sent some Riverlords by the Blackfish to begin fortifying and strengthening the Riverlands for a possible invasion. Unfortunately, with the Reach now on the Crown side, not only are they outnumbered, but they can invade from 3 areas. Littlefinger soon advises Robb to visit the Vale to personally meet with the lords there to thank them for their help. Though he is no longer master of coin, many merchants and businesses he has dealings with still have ties with him. For that reason, he suggests using that money to rebuild the Riverlands. Meanwhile, the rule of the North is left to Sansa and Jon Snow, who is aided by Mance. Jon Snow is now only an overseer of the wildlings and doesn't hold any titles. In the Vale, many lords were anxious to join the War of the 5 Kings. Jon Arryn's love for Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon is well known, so they are eager to join his son. They readily agree and begin assembling their men. One portion of this army will go to the Riverlands to help stabilize it, but Littlefinger suggests sending another portion elsewhere, the Stormlands. Though Littlefinger is no general, he understands chaos and sees the death of Stannis and Renly Baratheon leave them without leadership. While they are sworn to the Iron Throne, he points out their loyalty is not solid. A bold strike there might potentially cut the Westerlands in reach from the Crownlands. Meanwhile, in the north, Jon continues his attempts to settle the wildlings across the region. In his efforts, he's joined by Mance, Arya, and Sansa. The former King Beyond the Wall proves to be useful in bridging the gap between the Free Folk and Northmen, helping assuage quarrelsome chieftains and giving them a voice in the ruling. But to everyone's surprise, Sansa and Arya prove to help win them over. Arya is sent to be fostered by Tormund Giantsbane, so she may learn to become a spearwife. Sansa's courtly training and singing voice can win other chieftains over. In a land of desolation like those beyond the wall, songs are among the few joys they have, and her singing voice is nearly as effective as the diplomacy of Jon Snow. Jon Snow, being highly respected across the north, makes the Northlands more willing to cooperate. Together, they teach the wildlings smithing, allow their children to ward in great houses, and conduct trade that improves their standards of living. As a result, raiding becomes less common. They also receive letters from Robb, which provides them regular updates on events.
Robb writes that Littlefinger has convinced the Lords of the Vale to send us aid. The Knights of the Vale will ride under Lord Royce's banner and to reinforce his position in the Riverlands. Lord Baelish will soon join them to help rebuild the realm.
The Vale's knights are some of the finest in Westeros. If Robb has their backing, it's no small thing.
Aye. Another debt we owe to this Lord Pinkyfinger.
Littlefinger, Lord Raider. What do you mean?
No small thing, aye. But it's worth asking. Why would a man like Baelish help your brother? Where I'm from, men follow deeds, but also the promise of loot, weapons, gold, and women. A man like him wants something from his king.
Sansa, you live with Lord Baelish. What sort of man is he like?
Littlefinger saved me, Jon. He freed me from King's Landing. and he kept me safe from Lysa and the Eyrie. Without him, I might still be at Joffrey's mercy, or worse. But I know he is not popular in the Vale. He claimed his reward. He married our mother. He admits he's always loved her. Surely that is payment enough.
For the Knights of the Vale. But he says he's heading to the Riverlands to help rebuild it. Isn't he no longer Lord Paramount? Why bother leaving his new lady wife to head to a domain he does not even control?
Perhaps to curry favor? I'm not certain either. But all I know is that I'm free because of him.
Free, are you? Sometimes the greatest cages are the ones you don't see, and Lord Baelish strikes me as the sort to weave them tightly.
I know he saved you, but we must ask, did he do it for you, or himself?
Meanwhile, Robb's campaign in the south begins. Young Royce reinforces the Blackfish's army in the Riverlands. The knights spread out to halt a possible Tyrell incursion. They make no secret of this advance, having the knights riding from village to village, where they are greeted by cheers from the war-weary smallfolk, especially Jan Royce. The advance of the Vale and northern forces is as much a display of strength as a campaign of liberation. Villages once ravaged by raiders and Lannister forces erupt in cheers at the sight of their approach. Peter Baelish, however, is met with none of the same warmth. Yet this suits him perfectly. He bypasses the pomp and ceremony, traveling directly to Riverrun, where Edmure Tully holds the castle, leaving the glory of battle to Royce and Robb Stark to solidify. Jan Royce and Brendan Blackfish Tully assemble their forces on the outskirts of Maidenpool, where the Lannister-aligned forces of Randyll Tarly are. Thanks to their knowledge of the terrain, the Blackfish manages to cut off the other passes in a series of lightning strikes, keeping the other towns and castles held by the Lannisters cut off and unable to assist the garrison of Maidenpool. While the Valemen attack from the walls, they face fierce resistance from the Royalist host, and a bloody battle ensues, claiming the lives of many from all sides. But knowing that relief is unlikely, Randyll Tarly decides to slip out at night. The victory is decisive, and Royce wastes no time pushing further west. Small castles and villages are each liberated one by one. Even Harrenhal is swept up, as Royce's army seizes the fortress with little resistance, and all the Mountain's men are put to death. Meanwhile, Robb Stark, landing south of the Riverlands, wages a guerrilla campaign in the Stormlands. As anticipated, the Lannisters have left the region lightly defended. Robb capitalizes on this, striking at supply lines, ambushing patrols, and targeting loyalist strongholds. Houses once sworn to the Baratheons see Robb as their only hope of resisting the Lannisters, as he is the last true beacon of Lannister resistance. A few small royal armies go to confront Robb, many of them weak and poorly led, as the capital is in chaos, not just from the death of Tywin, but a new plague, the Sparrows. Somehow, through some mad plot, Cersei manages to convince them that Marjorie is guilty of fornication, but ends up being arrested herself. With both queens on trial, the situation seems ripe for chaos, which allow the rebel forces to thrive. Robb manages to secure a foothold in the Stormlands, with his allies capturing Storm's End at its base. But the one who thrives best in this chaos is Littlefinger, who directs his attention to rebuilding the shattered Riverlands. Peter visits towns and villages, repairing burned-out septs, ruined farms, and distributing food to the war-weary. His efforts are carefully crafted to court both the smallfolk and the faith. Word of his work reaches the High Sparrow, a new and high septum in King's Landing who grows increasingly critical of the crown's extravagance. Littlefinger sees this as an opportunity. Already he's managed to ensure that his hold on the Riverlands and the Vale grows. While the lords might initially cheer Jan Royce as he rides through their villages, it is Littlefinger they will remember who rebuilt their farms. In the Vale, he made sure that when the armies marched out, those lords opposed to him were sent out. Men from Redfort, Waynwood, and Hunter are among those in Robb's armies, while Jan Royce is leading his troops out west. This leaves only the Templetons, Corbrays, and Belmore in the Vale, those who are theoretically opposed to Littlefinger, but who he can buy or befriend. And so long as Lord Nestor holds the Bloody Gate, he can cut off the Vale army if necessary. Already, the presence of Catelyn Stark caring for Robert has put some lords at ease, ensuring his hold only grows. This is so much so that he manages to arrange a meeting with the High Sparrow in an old sept at the border of the Riverlands.
Lord Baelish, you've made great efforts in rebuilding the septs in the Riverlands. A noble work, though I wonder, what does a man of your reputation seek from the faith? You speak of loyalty, yet you serve a pretender. The boy who calls himself king in the north denies the rule of the Iron Throne and defies the faith's authority. And yet it is not his mother being charged with incest and fornication. The boy you speak of, Robb Stark, has brought peace to lands ravaged by the lion's claws. But you are correct. The north is filled with heathens. Wildlings who bow to no god. Northmen who worship trees, and old gods long forgotten. This is a blight upon the faith, one that must be remedied. I can arrange for septums to accompany my trade ships, spreading the faith's light as they go. Perhaps even a contingent of faith militant to safeguard their mission. Do this, and you will have my support. But remember, Lord Baelish, a man who serves only himself will find no solace in the Seven. Your works will be judged, not by me, but by the gods. There is one more matter to consider. I understand your misgivings about Robb Stark and his faith. However, his sister is a follower of the faith, trained by one of your scepters and knowledgeable in all the passages.
Robb's string of victories in the Stormlands bolsters his position. Mace Tyrell rallies an army of 20,000 men to march south. Though his wildling forces raid and ambush the enemy forces along the woods, they only slow them down. Robb gathers his forces, scraping up every soldier he can find and looking for a good spot to ambush them. Scouts bring alarming news. Another force has landed in Westeros. The Golden Company was led by Jon Connington. Their forces strike swiftly at the Stormlands, capturing castles along the coast. Without a direct land route, this could leave Robb Stark stranded south. Realizing the danger, Robb abandons plans for an immediate offensive against the Tyrells and redirects his armies south to Storm's End, one of his remaining holdings. He just barely beats the Golden Company, who soon begins besieging his forces. In the meantime, the cold air whips through Winterfell as Sansa takes a break from the meetings and petitioners. All of them come with the same complaints about the faith of the Seven and the faith militant. Sansa knows the arrival of the faith has only stirred resentment. They arrive from White Harbor and spread to all the camps and villages across the land.
A sight to behold, isn't it? Faith marched into the north, clad in steel and draped in righteousness. Hardly the warmest of welcomes, I imagine.
What are you doing here, Lord Baelish?
I've come to see you, my lady. I've been quite busy, as you can imagine, arranging for these good septums to make their way here. A favor for the High Septum, and in turn for your brother, though I hear their arrival has not been entirely welcomed.
No, it hasn't. The wildlings and many of the Northern Lords feel their beliefs are under attack. The fact that the faith comes armed only worsens the tension. This is not a land that bows easily, especially not to southern gods. Is all of this truly necessary for the Vale?
No. The vision has changed. The potential of this situation is greater than anyone else can imagine. Things in the south move quickly. Soon this war will reach its climax. And why settle for the North and Riverlands when all 7 kingdoms can be yours?
How can that be?
Squabbles grow and madness reigns in King's Landing. I do not ask you to endorse the faith, merely play along. When they arrive, recite all the verses your scepter taught you and nod along at their sermons. When this is all over, you may find yourself wearing a crown.
But as Littlefinger takes his leave, Sansa goes to her brother Jon. She warns him of his threat and tells him about what Littlefinger may do. Meanwhile, Jon Snow is already conducting his investigation that takes him to the Night's Watch. Despite weeks of siege, Storm's End remains defiant, as the Golden Company hauls trebuchets, rolls up siege ladders, and elephants try battering the gates. Robb is in the front, leading his men to fight off attackers. He appears wherever he is needed with Greywind by his side, tearing at men and frightening horses. Though supplies are dwindling, morale remains steady as they face attack after attack. Robb does not remain idle, sending out men to launch guerrilla raids, striking under the cover of darkness. All the while Mace Tyrell marches with the host, outnumbering both forces. But while Robb will still have his walls, the Golden Company risks being caught under two forces. As the sun sets, a rider approaches the castle under a banner of truce. Robb and his commanders meet in the Great Hall, where John Connington stands before them.
Lord Stark, your defense of this castle is admirable, though misguided. You fight a war you cannot win. If you hold us here, the Reacher's armies will arrive within days, and you will be crushed between them and us. Not before your men water the stones of this castle. Storm's End has stood against greater odds than this. If you think this is the end of our conquest, you will be mistaken. I have heirs, and the Riverlands in Vale. I do not doubt your courage, Stark, but courage will not feed your men, nor break this siege. You are king without allies. Lay down your arms, swear fealty to Aegon, and I will grant you terms benefiting your station. And what does your king have planned for the Seven Kingdoms? To rule, as was his birthright. He is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, rightful heir to the Iron Throne. That right was lost to him when his grandfather began burning people, my kin included. Your anger is understandable.
John hesitates, realizing his strategy isn't getting to him. Taking a deep breath, John decides to take a different approach.
Perhaps the matter of kinship doesn't need to be settled now. The situation is volatile, and if we fight here, then there is a chance both our causes might be lost. Perhaps we could come to an understanding later on, once we have dealt with the Lannisters. It seems like that is the one point we can agree on. Aye. What do you have planned? Something incredibly bold, or incredibly foolish.
The sun rises over Storm's End, revealing the golden banners of the Golden Company.
It seems like the sellswords wiped out the wolves for us. If they mean to keep the castle for themselves, let them try. We'll have it back by the day's end. Bring up the ladders. Storm the walls. Let the usurpers know that the Reach does not falter.
The siege begins with brief bombardments from mangonels that rain down stones on the stone walls. The defenders on the wall respond with a rain of arrows that cut down the nearest attackers. Dozens of Reachmen try to rush forward, bearing ladders under fire. Despite the losses, they surge forward and bring the ladders crashing against stone. Within minutes, Reach soldiers swarm toward the walls like ants, hiding under their shields. Defenders rush to meet them. A few ladders fall over, while others have their defenders cut down. It slows their advance, but does not halt it. Mace's confidence grows as the first of his soldiers crest the wall. But then a shadow moves within the melee. Robb Stark bursts forward as he cuts through the Reachmen like a whirlwind along the groups of the North and Valemen. Greywind snarls and tears into the unprepared soldiers, ripping throats and sending men screaming off the edge. The battlements erupt into chaos as more Northerners emerge from hiding in the towers, slamming into the Tyrell forces.
The wolves are still here! What treachery is this?
Before his commanders can answer, a horn sounds from the tree line beyond the siege camps. The sound is unmistakable, a battle call, deep and ominous. Mace's blood runs cold as the forest seems to come alive. From the woods, Golden Company warriors surge forward, their disciplined lines tearing into the exposed rear of the Reach army. With mercenaries at their back and Northerners on the walls, the Tyrell host is trapped. Panic ripples through the Reachmen as John Connington himself rides out at the head of the Golden Company, cutting down men as around him the cavalry smashes headlong into the flanks. Mace's commanders shout orders to regroup, but the field is already a slaughter. Mace watches in horror as his proud banners are trampled underfoot. On the walls, Robb fights with the fury of the North, Greywind at his side. The combination of his swordsmanship and the direwolf's savagery carves a path through the Tyrell troops who scramble down to find more foes waiting for them. The Reach army is breaking, its men fleeing in all directions. The Golden Company pushes forward, driving the rout further. Mace Tyrell, now surrounded by a dwindling number of his bannermen, finds himself cornered. His horse rears, its hooves pawing at the air as mercenaries close in. He shouts for his men to stand firm, but his words fall on deaf ears. Connington himself rides up, his sword leveled at Mace.
Lord Tyrell, your army is broken, your men scattered like leaves in the wind. Surrender now, or die here in the mud.
Very well. I yield.
The battlefield falls silent as Robb Stark descends from the walls, bloodied but triumphant. He strides through the wreckage towards Connington, who dismounts to meet him.
Well fought, Stark. You played your role to perfection. And you delivered the killing blow. Let's hope this alliance holds until King's Landing.
Greywind pads to Robb's side, his muzzle red with blood. Robb sends word for Jan Royce to advance further south. Now with the Golden Company by their side, they have the numbers to risk open battles and begin advancing up the King's Road. The heavy wooden doors of the Great Hall of Winterfell swing open with a groan, revealing Peter Baelish, who hurries to meet with the northern leaders. Jon Snow is there, flanked by Sansa Stark, and surprisingly, Catelyn Stark.
My lady wife, I'm surprised to see you here.
Only to hear your treason. Your efforts in the Riverlands are not why you're here.
Reports have reached us, Lord Baelish. The Faith Militant has been stirring unrest in the north, clashing with wildlings and even some of our bannermen. When I sent men to arrest them, the men of the Faith were allowed to come under your authority.
My lady, I assure you, I merely allowed a few septums to preach the faith and their guards. I indeed chartered their ships. It was part of an agreement to secure the support of the High Sparrow, a small price for the alliance we need to hold the Riverlands and...
Hold the Riverlands? You hold no authority here or in the north to make such decisions.
I acted in good faith to secure your family's position. The Riverlands and the Vale, even parts of the south, all must be united if we are to reclaim the Seven Kingdoms. Surely you see the wisdom in this.
The North was never yours to barter. You've sown unrest, and people have died because of it. You've overstepped. What makes you think we have an interest in the rest of the kingdoms?
Overstepped? My dear boy, all I've done is pave the way for a stronger claim. These wildlings you've brought south of the wall, they're the ones stirring trouble, resisting the natural order. The Faith merely...
The Faith came armed, Baelish. Armed and uninvited. Armed because you permitted it.
Yes, I confess, I allowed them here. But there is no treason in allowing a few septums and their guards here. If I overstepped, I shall gladly make amends. But there is no treason in that. I have only served your family.
Is that so? Because I have someone who can say differently.
Before Littlefinger can reply, Janos Slynt steps forward, flanked by two black-cloaked members of the Night's Watch.
Lord Slynt, is this the man you spoke of?
He came back to King's Landing. Tried to bribe me in Ned Stark's name, but then whispered to me, yes, he did. Doubled if I turn against him. Said it was for the good of the realm. Yes, he did.
The hall falls silent, the weight of the accusation hanging heavy in the air. Littlefinger's practiced smirk falters momentarily before returning, though weaker now.
This is madness. A man's crimes are washed away when he joins the Watch.
His crimes, not yours. You sold out my father, and then turned against the Iron Throne. That makes you twice as treasonous. Your actions led to the death of Northmen and wildlings alike. You made deals in our name, behind our backs.
Guards step forward, seizing Littlefinger by the arms. He doesn't struggle but looks towards Sansa with an almost pleading expression.
Sansa, Catelyn, you know me. Everything I've done, every step I've taken has been for you, to protect you.
You did it all for yourself, Peter. Winterfell is not a piece on your board.
Littlefinger's eyes flicker with panic for the first time as the guards drag him away, his voice echoing through the hall.
You need me. The game doesn't end here, Sansa. Without me, you'll never...
The doors slam shut behind him, leaving the hall in heavy silence. The next day, the guards bring Littlefinger out, where he is beheaded by the guards. The only protest that they get from the Vale Lords is that they weren't there to witness it themselves. In the south, King's Landing is ripe for plucking. The few defenders, soldiers loyal to Cersei Lannister and scattering mercenaries, offer sporadic resistance, but are woefully outnumbered. Their only relief, Randall Tarley, is kept occupied by the Blackfish and Jan Royce. This leaves the isolated garrison alone and outnumbered. The walls cannot hold them back as men attack from different gates and across the wall. The only true challenge comes as the combined armies push deeper into the city itself. The Faith militants, hastily organized militias, and a few defenders rush at them, picking off enemy soldiers and forcing them to fight for every step. Robb Stark rides at the head of his force, Grey Wind snarling at his side. The sight of the direwolf is enough to scatter defenders. The Golden Company has something better though: elephants. These great beasts rush through the larger streets, crushing defenders underfoot or sweeping them aside with their trunks. Despite their fanatical resolve, the poorly trained militants are no match for Robb's hardened bannermen and Aegon's elite mercenaries. Those flattened by the elephants are the lucky ones, as the rest are hacked apart. The bells of the city begin to toll, signaling surrender. But in the heart of the Faith militant, no quarter is given. They refuse to yield, barricading themselves in the Sept of Baelor. But this defiance is short-lived as they bring forward an elephant that batters down the gates. The floors run red with blood, the air heavy with the scent of incense and death. Grey Wind leaps into the High Sparrow's chamber, crushing the man's throat in his powerful jaws, as Jon Connington finishes the High Sparrow himself. With the city taken, Cersei is captured and executed, though her new champion, Robert Strong, kills many warriors before he's crushed under an elephant. The two kings begin a long negotiation process that ends with Robb being allowed to remain king in the north, but acting as a client kingdom whose foreign policy is decided by Aegon. Meanwhile, the rest of the Seven Kingdoms quickly yield to Aegon's rule after seeing the power of his armies. The remaining sparrows are forced to either yield or die across the Seven Kingdoms, as Aegon outlaws them again. Here the Northmen lead the charge, rounding them up and sending them back to where they came. Within a lively inn in Wintertown, an elderly-looking singer strums his lute, as all around him, men from all corners of the north gather to hear. Once Mance Rayder finds the sound he likes, he begins to sing. He starts with the Wolf Brothers, the song of how a great white wolf could not bear to be separated from his brother, and joined him in terrorizing the western lions, until the weasels tried to turn the young wolf against his brother with lies of treason. Rather than let his name be tarnished, he took up arms, cutting down his brother's enemies, the mad raiders who dared to invade his lands and the wild men of the north. After the tale finished, he turned to another tale, one of stars and the trickster. As the young wolf accepted the surrender of his foes, a little man, a vile trickster, arrived, promising armies for the wolf's mother. Yet what this trickster truly wanted was his kingdom. He convinced the young wolf to hunt south with his men in the lands of storms to finish off the wounded lions. But while he hunted, the little trickster began to conquer the north, turned the young wolf's sister against them, and promised the north to the stars above. So enamored with the stars, with this promise that they fell upon the north, forcing their ways upon its people. Finally, he plays the Sapphire Dragon. As the young wolf hunted, riding through the storms, huntsmen and knights from the Reach came to try and slay the young wolf, but their war had awoken something greater, a young dragon with brilliant sapphire scales. Rather than fight the young wolf, they joined forces and slew the huntsman, took the lion's den, and drove the stars back where they belonged. The Northmen and wildlings all cheered, clapping their hands and banging their cups. It is not difficult to feel a sense of comfort south of the wall. For the first time in years, it seems that peace has finally fallen onto the realm. With Aegon VI now sitting on the Iron Throne, it seems like there is now a true king of the Seven Kingdoms. With the help of Robb, he can secure the alliances of the Vale, Dorne, and the Stormlands, while the North and Riverlands remain loyal. Even the Westerlands and Reach have no choice but to surrender. This leaves the Iron Islands and their mad ruler Euron Greyjoy to contend with. He raids the western coasts, leaving them unable to fully recover. But with the crown lacking much naval strength, they cannot challenge Ironborn, forcing the Lannisters, Redwynes, and Hightowers to do most of the fighting. Meanwhile, remnants of the Faith militant persist, traveling to villages and holdfasts to rile against the murderous Aegon Targaryen. Though the North and the Golden Company have worked to eradicate them, hundreds still prowl, now with little more than bandits and rebels. They claim Euron's invasion is divine punishment for the unholy king and urge the people to rise against him. Among the crowds who listen to these sparrows, one figure listens to the sermon, gauging their reactions. Sir Barristan Selmy pulls his hood up and begins to depart. As one of the only men with experience in Westeros and Daenerys' court, he was sent ahead to determine the mood of the Seven Kingdoms and whether they were ripe for invasion. He begins to leave, but notices one figure looking at him. To his surprise, he recognizes the figure even with his drastic change. His hair, once spun like gold, is now pale. His face is sunken and haggard. His rich clothes were traded for simple brown robes. Lancel Lannister. The young knight invites Sir Barristan to talk over a fire. The two chat and discuss their new lot in life. With Lancel now a formal member of the Faith Militant, he continues to preach against Aegon VI, claiming a king has no right to dictate the will of the faith. Here Sir Barristan makes an offer to join forces with Daenerys, who might be more amenable to taking concessions with the faith, especially if they help her take the Iron Throne. Lancel is intrigued, but Sir Barristan tells him to travel west where the small folk might be more willing to join them. A few weeks later, on a dark and quiet night, a small fleet glides across the narrow sea, their flags bearing the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. Yet the garrison was not informed of any oncoming ships. They begin to mobilize just as the fleet anchors offshore. The defenders raise the alarm, gathering their weapons just as the men rush forward, a mix of freemen, sellswords, and a detachment of Unsullied. The garrison fights bravely, but they are small and ill-prepared. Without naval support, they have no hope for resupply. Soon the scaling ladders are placed on the walls, and a ram batters the gate. Though the garrison kills 5 men for every that falls, it isn't enough to halt their advance, and by morning, Daenerys holds Dragonstone. When the news breaks in the capital, Aegon calls for an immediate response. However, they do not have a large fleet as the royal fleet is too small to challenge them. It will take time for them to properly launch a counterattack. But in the meantime, all eyes will be on Dragonstone. But this is exactly what Daenerys wishes. Meanwhile, in the Reach, the Redwyne fleet is hard-pressed against the Ironborn, who have seized large swaths of the coastline. The Redwynes fight valiantly, retaking ground inch by inch, but the Ironborn are fierce, and their longships dart in and out of hiding spots and shallow rivers to strike like wolves, harrying their prey. During one such battle, the Ironborn sail out one of their captured ports, nearly 50 longships to the Redwyne 30. It would be a hard battle, but Lord Paxter continues sailing ahead. That is until one of his officers reports black sails from behind. He turns and freezes, seeing the Iron Fleet behind them on their upgraded longships. They are over 40 ships, and for a moment he fears that he's being outflanked. But through the forests of masts, another shape flies down, a trio of dragons. Panic spreads like wildfire through their ranks as the beasts descend, flames licking the heavens. Surprisingly, the dragons unleash their fury on Euron's fleet. Fire rains down upon the lead longship, which is reduced to smoldering wreckage. The Redwyne fleet halts its advance, stunned as the dragons scatter the once mighty Ironborn fleet. The Iron Fleet surrounds the surviving ships, capturing them, but the lead ship, Iron Victory, demands an audience with Paxter Redwyne. The crafty old warrior explains how he's allied with Daenerys Stormborn and intends to begin his invasion. He demands the loyalty of the Reach. Although Mace Tyrell eventually bent the knee to Aegon VI, many lords were still bitter after their defeats at the hands of the Golden Company. Their failures to deal with the Ironborn have only further embittered them. Many eagerly pledged themselves to Daenerys. The captured territories of the Ironborn begin to fall like dominoes, now that an experienced and disciplined force along with the Iron Fleet is brought to the field. They are driven out of the Reach entirely. But even better news arrives. When the Westerlands hear this, their lords eagerly pledge their banners to Daenerys, under the command of Kevan Lannister, who sees their success and the weaknesses of the crown. A big part of this is thanks to Lancel, who had ridden ahead and preached the arrival of Daenerys wreathed in fire and blood. The destruction of the Ironborn invasion is a sign enough for the faithful who rise in support. Soon, bands of faith militants spring up all across the Seven Kingdoms, growing to the thousands. Aegon VI sends out Jon Connington with the Golden Company down south to attack the Reach. Meanwhile, Aegon gathers soldiers from the Crownlands and the Vale to advance into the Westerlands. He also sends word to the north, the one region not affected by the Faith Militant uprising. Robb soon begins gathering his army. nearly 15,000 men consisting of Northmen, wildlings, and even giants. Their first true clashes happen in the far south, where Jon, stiffened by the Stormlenders, and Dornish rush to relieve Brightwater Keep, which belongs to Garland Tyrell. However, outside they find a host of Reachmen mixed with Unsullied, sellswords, and freedmen. A small force remains to keep the pressure up on the citadel, but the rest turn to face the new threat. The Unsullied anchored the center while freedmen and sellswords take the left flank, and a host of Reachmen led by Alkin Florent, who was promised his seat of Brightwater if he fights against the Tyrells. The Golden Company forms up in the center with Stormlanders under the command of Roland Storm taking position on the right. Jon decides to place the Dornishmen on the left to face off against their hated Reachmen foes. This proves instrumental as they eagerly battle through the Reachmen, driving them back while the other two units struggle to make headway against the disciplined ranks of the Unsullied or the ferocious sellswords and pitfighters. Although a crown victory, it is indecisive. The rest of their battle proves equally inconclusive as the Unsullied do not break. Meanwhile, Aegon's campaign is also struggling as the Faith Militant wages a successful guerrilla campaign against them. Led by Lancel Lannister, the remnants of the Militant ambush and strike the Royalist host, using the rivers to sail up and attack. However, Aegon destroys many outlaw bands. But under the counsel of his advisors, he pardons the survivors who wisely retreat to their villages. Soon, hundreds begin to slip away from the Faith's army rather than fight a war. However, it buys the Westermen time to mobilize, as Kevan gathers 10,000 men, who are joined by Daenerys' freedmen and Unsullied. By the time they cross the Golden Tooth, they are organized and well-equipped, putting up a difficult fight in the upcoming skirmishes. However, Aegon's forces prove equally ferocious, and the Vale Knights scatter the freedmen in a series of charges while the Crownlanders and loyal Rivermen close in. But the Lannister forces hold form until Daenerys Targaryen, astride Drogon, launches a devastating counterattack. Her dragons rain fire on vulnerable rearguard as her Unsullied freedmen sweep into the panicked center remnants of his army. In mere hours, Aegon's forces are scattered to the winds, leaving him stranded with a battered core of loyal soldiers. Lancel rallies the remnants of the Faith Militant and blocks his escape route to King's Landing, while Kevan Westerman presses in on him. The only relief comes from the north. Robb Stark crosses the neck with his army. His advance guard, bolstered by giants armed with massive clubs and crude bows, wreaks havoc, crushing Daenerys' freedmen and opening a path for Aegon to slip away. Robb orders the Riverlords to return home and simply harass the main forces as he remains in Moat Cailin, where Sir Barristan Selmy tries to present terms.
Your Grace, Daenerys Stormborn is not her father, nor her brother. Your ancestors served House Targaryen with honor, and she remembers their loyalty. There is no need for war between you.
No need for war, you say? Aye, we were loyal, and how was that loyalty rewarded? That was before my grandfather was burned alive while you stood there and watched. Sir Barristan, just as you sat and watched as my father was betrayed, remind your Dragon Queen that no army has ever crossed the neck without permission.
Daenerys, undeterred, turns her sights on the neck, determined to press northward. Her army advances slowly through the swampy terrain. However, now it is their turn to face the brutal guerrilla war, as the Chronic-men harass their every step. Aided by wildling raiders, they strike at every opportunity, and even the disciplined Unsullied can't stand against this type of fighting. Reluctantly, Daenerys pulls back and uses her dragons instead, burning through the swampy lands to clear a path for them. From the shadows, giants emerge, armed with bows large enough to rival the siege weapons of the south. They fire at the low-flying dragons, their arrows massive and deadly. One strikes Viserion's flank, forcing the dragon to scream and veer off, blood pouring from the wound. Another grazes Rhaegal, who retreats to the skies. Even Drogon, mighty and fearsome, takes a hit to his wing, grounding him briefly, before Daenerys orders their retreat. True to Robb's word, no army can cross the neck, dragons are not. The momentary reprieve allows Robb's forces to counterattack, emerging from the hidden paths of the neck. His men charge with the fury of wolves, driving Daenerys' disoriented army back. The freedmen, struggling in the swampy terrain, falter as the giants tear through their lines, and the hardened Northmen press their advantage. The frozen winds howl through the towering ice wall as scouts rush into Castle Black, stammering accounts of an army of death marching on the wall. The horn sounds once, twice, then a dreaded third time. The others are here. The defenders scramble into position, archers lining the wall and the gate sealed tight. The first wave of wights slam into the wall, their dead hands clawing at the ice as the Night's Watch rain fire and arrows upon them. Yet for every wight that falls, 2 more seem to take its place, and they begin to climb the wall. But something feels different. They seem driven to the point of madness by something. Word of the attack spreads swiftly across the north, reaching Robb Stark's camp. Although Aegon wishes to continue the offensive and finish Daenerys off, Robb reminds him that a king must serve his people and will not abandon the north. Robb calls for several prisoners taken in the recent campaign, including Brown Pen Plum and Sir Barristan Selmy. At first, neither can believe what they are saying, but Robb gives them a harsh look.
You claim you knew my father, Lord Barristan. Then you know he could not lie for his life, and neither can I. If you think this is a mercy, then you are mistaken. With the White Walkers around, you'd be safer rotting in that cell. What I ask of you is difficult. Make no mistake. Tell your queen what I've told you and make her listen.
As they approach the wall, they are relieved to see it still holding, but the White Walkers are relentless. They attack day and night, their wights climbing the walls and dragging rangers down while they batter at the gates relentlessly. The reinforcements help stabilize the front and provide much-needed relief, but their numbers seem endless. Most of this force is concentrated around the center, with Castle Black and the castles in that area. But in the Shadow Tower, the men see a small ship approaching with black sails. At first, they think it is reinforcements, but as it docks, they are greeted by the Ironborn, who rush forward with axes and swords in hand. The outnumbered garrison struggles to halt their advance, and soon their block stains the ancient black stones of the keep. There, Euron brings forth his warlords and priests. Each one begins to chant in their foreign tongues, as the blood of the dead Night's Watch feed into their magic. Here, the magic of the wall begins to weaken, while the gates are thrown open. From the mist, a single figure emerges, wearing icy armor with glowing blue eyes. The Night King raises his hands, and the dead begin to rise once more. The dead rangers and all those across the Bridge of Skulls. They surge through the opening and pour into the Seven Kingdoms for the first time in 7,000 years. Euron watches all of this and laughs.
At last, the final storm!
The first victims are Daenerys' reinforcements. As they march up the wall, wights and others burst through the mist, brandishing their weapons. Unsullied and freedmen are quickly cut down, sending the lines into chaos. For a moment, they are thrown into disarray, but Kevan and Sir Barristan slowly rally them, his footmen from a defensive square, locking shields and allowing the others to rally behind them. In the sky, the dragons unleash flames, buying them some time. Soon the Unsullied stiffen the defensive square, but the only thing that stops them from being overwhelmed are the dragons, which prevent them from massing their full force. The next few hours are horrific, as they are left surrounded at the White Walkers' mercy. However, their salvation comes with Jon, who leads a cavalry charge to their position. Their heavy horses and giants drive the wights back and open up a gap for them to retreat to Last Hearth. Euron, however, is not finished. He emerges from the shadows of the battle, his laughter echoing across the carnage, and chases after them. Jon sends word to Robb, asking him to pull back and take the wights at the rear. Already, Jon Connington is coming from the south to reinforce them too. This is only a matter of holding out until they arrive. The storm over Last Hearth rages like a vengeful god, snow whipping through the air as the wights' inhumane screeches echo through the night. Jon Snow stands at the battlements alongside Daenerys, their forces safe, but only for a moment. Great Jon Umber bellows commands, rallying his men. Daenerys' dragons circle above, raining fire on the undead horde. They manage to hold out for several days, keeping the restless dead at bay with a combination of dragonfire and careful sorties. But it is far from bloodless, as their army is at the breaking point, with the walls starting to break down. Jon drives back the undead who scale the wall, his sword flashing as they try to find a foothold. Below, the Night King looks at the rear, surveying his army, but at the front is Euron Greyjoy.
Hold the walls as long as you like, Snow. I'll be claiming your queen before dawn.
True to his word, several scaling ladders are dropped, letting him clear the wall. But by Jon's side is Sir Barristan, who holds his longsword ready. Wights swarm across the walls, their claws flashing and ripping through flesh as they begin their attack, pressing the defenders to their breaking point. Great Jon leaps into the thick of the fighting, standing back to back with Grey Worm as they drive the dead back. Jon hacks down at the dead, while Daenerys flies overhead to stem the tide. But as she flies low, a host of risen giants fire their bows, striking Drogon against the side and forcing him to land. Euron sees his chance and rushes up one of the ladders. He begins cutting down defenders with unholy ferocity, his jagged blade cleaving through the line of defenders. Sir Barristan Selmy steps forward, his sword gleaming in the faint firelight. Laughing, Euron swings his jagged axe at him. Their clash is brutal. Euron's raw, chaotic strength against Barristan's disciplined skill. Despite his age, Barristan gracefully slides through each attack, sliding back and kicking snow in Euron's eyes. Sir Barristan rushes forward, his blades striking at the chinks of his armor, and blood rushes down from his elbow. Suddenly, Euron is on his feet and slams the butt of his axe into his chest and sends him flying back. Euron roars and swings at him, but Jon blocks his attack. He holds him back until Grey Worm hurls a spear at his side. The blow sends Euron staggering and allows Barristan to rise and rejoin the fight. He advances slowly, his movements remaining crisp as ever as his blade flashes. Sir Barristan now recovered, and with Jon Snow and Grey Worm supporting him, Euron begins to struggle. His axe swings and tires to keep them back, but they spread out and continue to strike simultaneously, keeping him from ever getting a reprieve. Suddenly, Barristan lunges forward as Euron drives Jon back with his backswing. He drives his blade through Euron's chest. The madman staggers, blood seeping from his lips, before collapsing in the snow. With him dead, the trio rush back to the defenses, cutting through the wights and destroying the siege ladders. It holds them off for now as Drogon manages to create a wall of fire around them. For now, the defenses seem to hold. Jon Snow receives word from the Ravens. Robb and Aegon are approaching from the rear. Reinforcements from Jon Connington are also on the way. The undead batter the walls, their icy claws scraping through wood and stone. Each time the dragons strafe the field and create another wall of fire, the Night King puts it out, leaving them with a shorter window to recover. His undead giants make it difficult to maintain an attack for long without the risk of being shot down. Jon and Daenerys coordinate their forces as best they can, but exhaustion begins to show on the faces of the defenders. Even Great Jon Umber advises a retreat. Robb and Aegon march through the blinding snowstorm, riding down the wights. Their assault begins with precision. Giants from the north break through frozen barricades, while Aegon's cavalry charges into the flank of the undead, cutting deep into the horde. But even then, the fighting is slow going, and does little to hinder the dead in front. After several more days of fighting, the defenses begin to break. The gates suffer days of punishing assaults, and finally crack under the swarms of wights. Great Jon and Grey Worm organize their defenses, a thick phalanx of freedmen stiffened by Northmen on either side. They hold off the wights for a little bit, but their numbers are endless, and the numbers begin to show. Jon and Sir Barristan stand in the midst of this, trying to protect their brothers in arms. Seeing their forces about to fall, Daenerys takes Drogon once again, unleashing their flames in a low-flying attack. But while brave, it is exactly what the Night King wants. His icy spear appears in his hand and hurls it at Daenerys. It strikes Drogon across the neck and sends him tumbling to the ground as the wights surround them. Though Rhaegal and Viserion try to protect them, the arrows begin to rain on them. Seeing this, Jon feels an overwhelming fury rush through him. Taking his sword, he rushes out along with Sir Barristan and Great Jon and whatever Northmen remain. The Elder Knight in particular is a beast incarnate. He cuts through a horde of wights, rushing to his queen's side. He finds himself back in the War of the Nine Penny Kings, when he rushed up against Maelys the Monstrous. However, this time he is facing a foe far greater. The Night King turns to face him, an icy sword blocking Sir Barristan's first strike, just a few feet from Drogon's body. Their swords flash and Barristan grits his teeth, not giving an inch. He shoves back against the Night King. Their blades connect with an ear-splitting shriek as the cold blows around them. Their sortie, while brave, is quickly diminished, and Jon rushes to their side as Sir Barristan swings once again, aiming to take the Night King's head off. However, the Night King ducks under the attack and counters with a lightning strike that Sir Barristan barely notices. Suddenly, Sir Barristan's blade shatters, and the Night King drives his sword into his stomach. Jon screams out and readies his sword, but suddenly, Jon hears trumpets behind himself. Elephants. A second army appears through the mist, smaller than most, but still powerful. At their head are a small herd of elephants. They throw aside the White Walkers and Whites, crushing them underfoot and allowing the infantry and cavalry to come rushing behind them. They hear the banners of the Golden Company and House Connington. Seeing this, Jon lets out a roar and rushes to the Night King. Their clash is fierce, the Night King's icy blade clashing against Jon's sword. The cold around the Night King is oppressive, sapping Jon's strength with every blow, but Jon fights on, driven by sheer will, and thankfully his effort to defeat Sir Barristan seems to have weakened the Night King, preventing him from using his full power. Jon presses the attack, getting under the Night King's attack, and with a final surge of strength, he drives his sword through the Night King's chest. For a moment, the world seems to hold its breath, as the icy general shatters into 1,000 fragments. The undead collapse en masse, their connection to their master severed. The battlefield falls eerily silent, save for the crackling of fires and the labored breath of the living. Their army quickly searches for the dead survivors. Unfortunately, Daenerys and her dragons are not among them. The swarming of the undead slaughters all 3 of them. However, their sacrifice allows the rest of their people to claim victory. Now, without the queen, the remaining Unsullied and freedmen are allowed to return to Essos, where they create a series of city-states out of their slaver cities. Now they are determined to continue their queen's mission to end slavery. Meanwhile, Aegon is now the undisputed king of the 7 kingdoms and begins to wipe out the remaining rebel forces. The Westerlands and Reach quickly fall back into line, though many High Lords find themselves on the chopping block for their treason. Robb remains king in the north, and Jon Snow is given a new mission: to travel beyond the Wall, begin surveying the situation there, and perhaps help the wildlings resettle. As he prepares to depart, he exchanges one final goodbye with his family. Even Catelyn bids the young Snow goodbye. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.